As a leader, it's easy to get caught up in the day-to-day demands of your job and forget about the bigger picture. However, it's important to remember that your time as a leader is limited and the impact that you make will extend far beyond your tenure. That's why building a leadership legacy should be a top priority for any successful leader. Now, last week in the Ask Denis episode 430, I talked about the 5 essential steps to building a leadership legacy. And as a result of that, one of our avid listeners of the Leadership is Changing podcast sent me a couple questions in relation to last week's Ask Denis episode. Nadine, thank you for your questions and sending them through. And Nadine's asked, in relation to the limit of set and purity, where I talk about taking the torch and passing on the light, how do we as leaders know when to think about passing the torch or passing it on? And how do we even know if we are at that level where we should be passing it? So let's discuss.
Welcome to Leadership is Changing. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change. This is taking your leadership to another level by finding the balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing with your host, Denis Giannoutsas.
Hey, welcome to the Ask Denis episode. This is a freestyle episode where I'm asked a question by our listeners, or I share my thoughts, experiences, and insights from working with many leaders around the globe. Listeners, we want to keep promoting the podcast and lifting its visibility, so please leave a rating and a review about the show on the Apple if you listen to this episode today on Apple. And if you listen to it on actual Spotify, that'd be great if you can put a rating. It all helps with the visibility of the show, so we really appreciate that. Okay, listeners, let's get into today's topic of when is the right time to build your leadership legacy. And Nadine's asked some very good questions there. And I think the very first, the second part of her question is really, when do we know we're at the right level? Well, a leader is a leader at any time. And I'm going to get into some things here now in relation to that. But it's going to probably answer both questions. So here we go. So as a leader, it's easy to get caught up in the day-to-day demands of your job and forget about the bigger picture, as I said. However, it's important to remember that your time as a leader is limited and that the impact that you make will extend far beyond your tenure. Now, what do I mean by that? That's more about that what you do today can be felt or used or referred to by others in the future, whether you are the leader of that team or that organization anymore, or you are no longer on this earth. Now, you know what I mean by this, and the fact that you and I have talked about leaders that we've worked for in the past, or leaders that we've seen in the political stream, or in the sporting field as well. We talk about these leaders and we refer to them. Sometimes for us, that's a positive or a negative experience, and that's helped shape us as leaders as we are today and in the future. But you know what? Building a leadership legacy should be a top priority for any successful leader. Now, by starting early and, here's the key, consistently focusing on those key areas, you'll be better prepared to leave a lasting legacy that will continue to benefit your organization and industry long after you moving on. Now, the thing is, it's really important you start doing that. So if you're a leader, my answer to Nadine's question is, don't wait any longer. The best time to start preparing and executing your plan is now. If you haven't already started, it's now. If you have already started, great, but what can you do to take it to another level or possibly do reviews and start thinking about things? Now, building a leadership legacy is a long-term process. Now, that requires significant investment of time and resources. Now, by starting early, you're going to have a lot more time to develop your skills, build your network, and make a meaningful impact on your organization and the industry. Meaning that if you're starting early, you'll be able to do a lot more and you'll be able to set up things beautifully for the future. Now, one of the most important steps in building a leadership legacy is developing a succession plan. This involves identifying potential successors. Now, I'm saying successors, not just successor, because I don't think it's just the one person. It could be several people, because you see people do move on. Now, what you want to do is assess their strengths and weaknesses And then you want to provide the training and development opportunities that they would need to do or put in place to prepare for the role. Now, succession planning is a long-term process as well that requires careful planning and execution. Now, by starting early, you'll have a lot more time to identify and develop potential successors, and you'll be able to be better prepared for unexpected departures or changes in leadership. That's what I meant earlier on, that sometimes they might move on to go do something else, and so we may not have been expecting that, and they're now no longer going to be the successor. But wait, what actually does happen sometimes is that they might move on to another organization within the organization, so another business unit or another team, or they might move on to another total different organization and then come back to you 2 years, 3 years, 5 years later, and they're coming back a lot stronger, more developed, bigger experiences, far greater war stories that they'll have to share as well. Now, another key aspect of building a leadership legacy is developing a culture of continuous learning and development. Now, that involves creating a culture where everyone's going to be encouraged to learn and grow, and where the leadership development is viewed as a priority as well. Some organizations do, and some organizations don't see it as a priority. By investing in the development of your team, you'll not only prepare them for the future leadership roles, but you'll also create a more engaged and motivated workforce. And that's better to equip them to achieve the organization goals and have them really quite motivated. In fact, they should already be motivated. Your role here is to really inspire them. It's also important for us to focus on building relationships and networks both within and outside your industry or your organization. Now, that involves with developing networks with other leaders in your industry, building relationships with key stakeholders, and collaborating with other organizations to achieve shared goals. In other words, you can work with other business units to work together to have a shared goal. Now, by building stronger relationships and networks, not only are you going to enhance your brand and reputation, but you're also better positioned to drive change and influence others, and that's going to be real key. But you see, the other thing too is that by building relationships out there in the marketplace, in the industry and other areas, you're then starting to see what other talent is available out there in the marketplace that you can attract to your organization in the future as well, that could also be part of your legacy too. Now, building a leadership legacy is not something that happens overnight. It's a long-term process, and it requires, as I said before, consistent effort and dedication. Now, I want you to remember that the best time to start preparing and executing your plan is now. Now, by starting early, you'll have more time to develop your skills and build your network and make a meaningful impact on your organization and the industry. So listeners, leaders, don't wait any longer. Take action today and start building a leadership legacy that will inspire and empower others for many years to come. Nadine, hey, thanks for your questions. Really appreciate them. Listeners, if you've got any questions for the Ask Denis freestyle episode, feel free to reach out to me and send me a message like Nadine did on social media in a private message, or send me an email, dennis@leadingchangepartners.com. Well, thank you for listening to this episode. We hope that you found these thoughts very helpful. To those of you who are observing Holy Week, we wish you a happy Easter. And to all of our listeners, really, is what I wanted to say, is have a massive, successful quarter as we've started now a brand new quarter of the year. As I always finish off with some calls to action, so here's one of them, and that is, have you started passing on the torch to others? Have you started putting in plans? What is your leadership legacy strategy and plan? And what are you doing about it? And how are you going to measure it? How are you going to hold yourself to be, as I said before, consistent and also deliberate in what you're doing? All right, team. Hey, I just also wanted to share with you that there are many people who've been made redundant of late in other organizations around the world. And for a lot of that's not an easy time. So if that's you and you're feeling a little bit lost and you want clarity about where your next steps are, or you want to find a job, or you're wanting to go and start a business, but you're not sure what to do, For some of you, I just want a job, and I get that. But you know what? Don't jump too early, too quickly. This is a great time for you to step back and think about what you might want to do going forward, whether that be in another role or business, whether you buy a business or start a business, whether you go out contracting. There's so many different things for you to think about. Now, I've helped many executives and senior leaders, entrepreneurs, and people do this. And so feel free to reach out to me if you're willing to do that. But if you're a person who's at the moment really wanting to move on to another role, do something bigger, but you're not sure what that role looks like, you want clarity around that, you're not sure how to get there, and you're probably also thinking, that's a bigger role, but maybe there's some skill gaps that I have or some areas that I need to work on. Well, to answer all of that, we have an executive coaching program whereby we've got some actionable coaching steps, and it's a step-by-step approach that will help you gain that clarity and give you the courage that you need to move on to make that next move. Now, for some of you might be looking to disrupt the status quo, or you simply want a greater purpose and fulfillment in your career and in life. So the exec coaching that we'll do will give you the tools and the guidance to help you make it happen. Now, if that sounds like you, and then what I want you to do is I'm going to offer you a free strategy call. It's free. You and I get on a call. We'll get on a Zoom call, and we'll talk about where you are right now, where you're wanting to go, and then we can talk about how I might be able to help you going forward to make that leap. Hey, listeners, well, that's it for this episode. It's always a pleasure being with you. Thanks for joining me on the Leadership is Changing podcast. Until next time, bye for now.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Leadership is Changing with your host, Denis Giannoutsas. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change, inspiring executives and leaders to adapt and lead a bigger game in a fast-moving world.